Welcome back to ALECA Talks, the podcast where we sit down with leaders shaping a more sustainable future. I'm your host, Serge, aka the boring ESG guy, if you want to follow me on social media. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome someone who has built one of the most respected SME-focused accounting firms in Asia, Paul Gardner, CEO of Fresh Accounting. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you very much for having me.
No worries. It's our pleasure. For our listeners, Paul is a chartered management accountant originally from London who moved to Hong Kong in, I think, 2014. Over
Yep,
the
that's right.
years, he worked across professional services, creative industries, tech, e-commerce, distribution, not-for-profit sectors as well. He's known for building finance functions that actually support the business, not slow it down, and for growing his company, Fresh Accounting, into a multi-country operation spanning Hong Kong, Singapore, and Nepal, I believe.
Yep.
Today, I want to explore your journey, Paul, your philosophy on social purpose. We'll get to that in a minute. The China automation landscape, right? And the evolving SME environment and what the future of accounting looks like for SMEs. Does that sound all right?
That sounds good to me. I'm ready.
Okay, cool. So your LinkedIn bio says that you've always believed in the finance function must be supporting the business. I like that. But take us back. Where did it all start? What drew you into accounting in the first place?
Wow. I think I was growing up overseas across Africa as a child, back to England when I was 10. My father lost his job when I was 17. So really from internships at the age of 17 to starting my career when I was 18. Really lucky to be working in sort of the TV media industry from 1993 onwards. And I was given the opportunity to take on a role in accounting, and not something I necessarily thought I'd be doing, but it was being able to work within an industry I wanted to work in. And that really allowed me to understand numbers, play with numbers, learn systems, and this incredible experience of just actually realizing that numbers are storytelling. So here are a set of numbers that make a P&L balance sheet and then reporting to management, to the board. And at the age of 18, I actually really enjoyed the part that in order to understand the numbers, speak about the numbers, really it's about the storytelling, but you need to build the building blocks to understand accounting itself. So I was really, really lucky, at a young age to get into the accounting industry, but working in-house in accounting.
Okay, great. So it was at a young age you found that inspiration. What about what made you leap from London to Hong Kong? Tell me about that journey. That's
Wow.
a big leap.
Very big leap. I think throughout my late teenage years, my 20s, my 30s, this ability, as you were saying earlier, to move, sort of growing my accounting role, sort of working with really interesting businesses, quite often fast-growing businesses, business turnarounds, across a variety of sectors. What was really interesting was each time learning something new, understanding that systems, processes, numbers are all the same across every business, but it's just quite often the uniqueness and of what each organization wants. And I think what I really appreciated was that having worked across a variety of businesses in London, not being, seeing businesses grow regionally across Europe, globally, but everything was always from the comfort of a chair somewhere in London. There was something more that I wanted to do. And I always, when my father worked overseas, I actually also wanted to work overseas, but you need to be quite brave to do that.
I agree. You're a foreigner. You need a work permit. You don't have that fallback position where I can always, go live with friends, or you
Yep.
have that safety net, being an expat. But I guess growing up as an expat, you didn't have that safety net as well. So you had that sense of adventure and no need for a safety net. You know how to fly on
Yeah.
your own.
And I think what happened was with I really want to work overseas, and I chose Asia. The US felt quite complicated. Europe at the time was too close to home, although on reflection of Brexit, maybe not so close.
Yeah.
Australia or New Zealand might be too far away. And so Asia felt like a really interesting place to be. There's a choice of Hong Kong or Singapore, and I chose Hong Kong partly because of friends living here. And I really came here, having spoken to recruitment agencies, seeing what the opportunities were. I had to be here to find a job. So I couldn't just find a job from the comfort of, and having worked in SMEs, not a multinational firm that was sending me here. If I really want to find a job in Hong Kong, I need to actually fly on a plane and be here to look for something. And I think that was the part of me for the management accountant, not financial accountant, which is the risk management, the risk calculation, that actually a city of, at the time, 7.7 million people, over 300,000 SMEs, what could possibly go wrong? And I'd much rather try something and fail it than wonder what if. And I think that part of being able to come out to Hong Kong really both brave, foolish, naive, but also like a huge positive energy behind it.
Yeah, I agree. You landed in Hong Kong, and of course, Hong Kong changed it in 1997, right? And you landed in what, 2014, maybe, was it? Or when
Yes.
did, yeah, 2014. So
Wow.
it was still changing. And of course, the evolving landscape, it's going to keep going until what? It's 2047 that there's kind of
Yeah, the
enough.
50-year handover.
What do you think? What do you think of the business culture? You said it was unique, but Hong Kong, is it evolving still?
Yeah, I think so. I think Hong Kong is one of those cities that you can never underestimate it. And it's primarily because of the population, it's people. And I think whether it's the foreigners coming here to work, the local Hong Kongers working here, I think there is such a unique environment that really makes Hong Kong a hot pot of East meets West. And I think with the transition from handover from the United Kingdom to China, there has been a lot of change. And I think that has also been unsettling, and where we've seen large businesses perhaps migrating to Singapore, there's still the fact that businesses still have roots here in Hong Kong. And when you have such a sizable business community that is also of multinational firms, it still creates a really hotbed of SMEs, from startups to growing medium-sized companies. So it's a really interesting dynamic here. And whatever starts in Hong Kong usually expands out of Hong Kong. So whether you're a multinational firm, whether you're an SME, Hong Kong always, we see it as being small. It's many levels, in many ways, it's a very big city, but you do see businesses expand beyond Hong Kong. And that's something that also makes Hong Kong quite unique in its characteristics.
Well, Fresh Accounting, your company, it was established there and then it grew. So what's the size? What's the size of Fresh Accounting today?
Wow. So Fresh Accounting in 2014 was one person in a MacBook to three offices. So Hong Kong, Singapore, Nepal, and a team of just under 25 people.
Okay.
Pretty much entirely self-financed, bootstrapped. And I think as a firm, we never, having worked in-house accounting roles, I've never worked in tax, I've never worked in audit, I've never been a CFO on paper. So actually coming out to Hong Kong, like, what is this business going to be? So really trying to build a multidisciplinary management accounting firm that could help SMEs. And I think for us, what started in Hong Kong in 2014, we saw a lot of our clients expand into Singapore in 2016. So again, bravely, foolishly, naively, optimistically, we set up an office in Singapore to help those same clients that we worked with in Hong Kong. And that ability that clients trusted us and actually wanted us to help across two cities really sort of built an interesting business that's regional here in Asia. Quite often if you look at UK, it's London and Manchester, or US, New York, San Francisco. Hong Kong and Singapore, a bit further, well, a 4-hour flight between the two. But again, there's sort of similarities, differences, but the opportunities to work across both cities has been very rewarding and incredible for us.
So that was a nice transition when a client moves from Hong Kong to Singapore, then you can say, well, hey, I'll keep supporting you. So that was a nice way to expand the business.
Yep.
You take
And
some risk, of course, opening another office or having another team there, but I think it was worth it. Congrats on that.
thank
Um,
you.
when you're building kind of that business strategy, as you mentioned, that multidisciplinary management accounting firm, you said you want purpose, a clear social purpose. When we met before, we discussed
Yes.
this. So beyond accounting support, and clearly that management accounting multidisciplinary approach is at the heart of fresh accounting. But could you walk me through, should accountants be the leaders in that sustainability storytelling? What do you think?
Yeah, I think we have a place. I think we have a role to play. I think quite often, if you look at developed countries, Western countries, quite often policy is, everything is led by policy. And I think businesses that sort of look at this area and sustainability and measurement and KPIs, that can actually beat the red tape and regulation, I think have a competitive advantage. I think with Asia, with Hong Kong and Singapore, we're still quite behind in terms of regulation. I think it's 2028 and 2029, Singapore and Hong Kong respectively, where certain regulations will come in around ESG reporting. But I do believe as well with a lot of clients that we work with out of Hong Kong or Singapore, designed in Hong Kong, manufactured in China, designed in Singapore, manufactured in Malaysia. What's really interesting is that if you are producing or providing something, providing products to the US or Europe, a lot of the larger listed companies are then having certain requirements of reporting from the Hong Kong SME, so it could be carbon footprint, etc. So I think there's that ability where there is some regulation on larger entities here for providing data to listed companies in the US or UK or Europe. But at the same time, it's still very light-hearted. And I think, again, as I said earlier, we're always a little bit behind in Asia with this. But I think it's important where most accounting firms focus on tax compliance, getting things done. Actually, the progressive management accounting firms, and there's not a huge number of us in Asia, surprisingly in many ways. I think it's trying to find what are the next trends, how can you help businesses? And I think this is something that's very important to us.
Okay, so it kind of sets you apart, right? As fresh accounting, if you're pushing into this space and it's not required yet, and yet it's being asked for everywhere we turn, from consumers turning their products over and reading their labels to large companies asking their supply chains, which is full of SMEs, for their numbers. None of it's required yet, but there's got to be some leadership in that space. And I'm happy to hear Fresh Accounting is one of those leaders, because it's coming. And 2028, 2029, Singapore, Hong Kong, yeah, those are written on paper. So it's coming. It's a trend that's not going away. Would
And
you
and I
say, go ahead.
so I'm just thinking as well, because when Fresh was born back in 2014, so Hong Kong and in Singapore in 2016, and not to forget Nepal and Kathmandu in 2021. I think what's really important for us is that the things that would keep me up at night, like if you're going to build an accounting firm, if you're going to build an advisory firm, helping businesses go digital, all the things that so many other firms can do what we do and maybe do it better. So there's so many times of the sleepless nights. What if other firms copy us and do what we do? But I think there's that part which actually that's not something I need to worry about. What we should worry about is what are the next trends in accounting, or what are business owners? And obviously the larger the business, quite often we work with CEOs, founders, but even as Fresh evolves in Asia, we're working with not just CEOs, founders, we're working with CROs, CFOs. Quite often they just need help, or they need someone to have an opinion or someone to give guidance. And I think that's quite important, that when I used to worry about what keeps me up at night when other businesses could copy us, actually put that to one side. What what do we think are the most important topics that businesses will need to worry about, rather than us worrying about competitors? So I think that's been a big part, especially around sustainability, ESG. I think that is quite important. And again, as it's still so in Asia, it is coming. And I think it's important to have the right software partners, including ALECA, which can actually help. And I think that's really important in Asia, where it's the topics that are coming up are going to become more and more important. And it's just trying to be at the forefront of those conversations.
Yeah, I like to hear that. Of course, because it's not required, because there's really no compliance issues. It's more of a mentoring and education position right now, and how you communicate that with clients. And because you're in the management space, you're trying to position your clients to win. You want your clients to be successful. You mentioned, designing in one country, building in another, but exporting around the world, right? That's always the success case for SMEs, is to sell something locally, but also to export it globally. So how would you say that the mentoring and education shapes your communication with clients?
I think it still feels quite slow. And that's again because if a client isn't asked for it, let's not worry about it. And I think that is something I do understand. And you do have to respect those decisions. However, just because clients aren't asking for it now, they will be looking at it. And it is still something on everyone's radar. I think, just before we started the podcast, we are talking about global warming. We're talking about, typhoons across Asia, forest fires across Europe, forest fires in Canada. I think there are so many challenges. And I think when it comes to manufacturing, consumerism, what's really interesting is that, yes, you can look at the large multinational firms, you can look at their footprint, but at the same time, when you also look at just the sheer number of SMEs, whether it's manufacturing, service, that actually are the backbones of economies. And so actually, and governments don't want to put pressure on us yet for regulation, because it's perceived to be a burden. But I do think that I do feel, when you look at some of our clients that, and here in Asia, or UK clients that are running businesses in Asia, they are business for purpose, profits going to charity, for example. And I think one of those important elements is that we do need to think about what is needed and how we report to stakeholders and provide information, and how can we perhaps leave the world in a better place than how we found it, which is something that's also quite important to me.
Yeah, no, I fully support that message. Of course, there's a sense of urgency in all this. However, if it's not compliant or it's not required, you tend to push it off. But just like CSR, your corporate social responsibility, you don't have to do these things either. However, most companies do. So there's a balancing act at this stage. Before that 2028, 2029 timeframe, you want to be positioning yourself in this space. And I think you're doing a great job in that.
Thank you.
Of course, there's an elephant in the room here, Hong Kong and China. Let's talk about the elephant in the room here. China, when you think of energy efficiency, I like to think of energy efficiency as capital efficiency and lower carbon emissions. And of course, you've got scale. With China, there's a massive amount of scale. So what does an SME, SME might have different, visions. The Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia SME versus a China SME. What does it look like? What does an SME look like today in China?
Wow, I think it's just such a proliferation of businesses across all of the provinces. It's the second largest economy in the world. And, from manufacturing, banking, and tech, it's really incredible how the Chinese government is very hands-on It's very supportive across all economies. It doesn't always allow one business profile to be larger than others. And so, for example, seeing a lot of the fintechs growing, expanding prior to COVID, during COVID, there becomes regulation to prevent them from having too much superiority. So the government is very protective of ensuring that no one platform is dominating. But what's also interesting is when you think of China, we think of, I was going to say, we think of petrol cars, not anymore, electric cars, developing planes, drones, the technologies, literally how a WeChat, how everything, and payments via phone, not a credit card. When you're just looking at how so much of the China economy works, and even from Hong Kong, where, Hong Kong, China is one country, two systems. The ability from us in Hong Kong to get into China is it's so easy for us these days. In Hong Kong, where we still sometimes rely on cash, as soon as you arrive in Shenzhen or Shanghai, everything is dependent on a mobile phone, which can be quite frustrating. So you have to learn to embrace a different way of doing things. But I do feel as well, with tech, electric cars, yes, Tesla's built a lot of its manufacturing in China and Shanghai, but just seeing some of the brands such as BYD, about 20 years old, and seeing a lot of these brands that have been around for some time are actually fast becoming brand names that no one in the developed world, in the Western world, that no one's ever really heard of before. And I think what's interesting is how the Chinese government just supports manufacturing, supports the economy, ensuring that people have jobs. And even around AI, I think I was just reading last week or 2 weeks ago that how AI is going to be regulated to ensure that actually, what's going in is actually, inputs in equals to output. So there is a control that how AI is going to be able to help businesses within China rather than how we see what's happening in, the other worlds around us or in the other countries around us.
Well, that AI is a whole other discussion, but what really,
sorry about that.
what really got me thinking when you think of sustainability is about how hands-on and how heavy-handed is the government in, with their involvement, a lot of times prop up certain aspects or certain manufacturing networks. And then the moment they stop getting involved, it just collapses. So that's always our concern as the rest of the world are these supply chains just going to collapse at one point because they're being propped up because the government is so heavy-handed? Do you see that, or do you want to comment on that?
I think working with quite a few Hong Kong clients that have operations in China or, transactions within China, it's really interesting that, yes, the Chinese government supports all industries. I wouldn't say it underwrites, but it supports the industries, but at the same time, it's actually allowing industries to develop, thrive, and grow. So even working with one of our clients in Hong Kong, looking at the sustainability in food, because again, a lot of food that we consume in Hong Kong does come from China: fruits, vegetables, eggs. Very similar to Singapore, with a lot that comes across the border from Malaysia. What you see in Hong Kong, quite often eggs thrown in from Thailand, Japan, Australia, US, and actually a client of ours that we're working with is actually bringing cage-free eggs from across the border by train, or I was going to say car, by train or truck into Hong Kong. So there is no carbon footprint of flying food in. We're still going to consume American beef or Australian beef or Japanese beef. We're still going to have yogurt from, countries regional around us. But this ability to actually appreciate that China is also developing its own sustainable food supply chain is really interesting. And that can also benefit Hong Kong. So the brands that you're so used to seeing in a supermarket from our respective home countries does become a little different in Hong Kong. But at the same time, it's interesting to see that a lot of the supermarkets in Hong Kong that are owned by public listed companies are also preparing to find alternative supplies that reduce the carbon footprint ahead of the 2028, the 2029 reporting deadlines that are going to be sort of put in place for listed companies in Hong Kong. So actually seeing how China can be part of the solution, I think, is also very important. And I think a lot of what happens in China, no one else really from around the world really gets to see that unless you're quite close to China.
Yeah, no, now that I see it, now that I hear it, something sustainability for the China economy, supplying everything locally is very much sustainable for Hong Kong as well, because it's right there. Shenzhen is right there, and you're getting things in from mainland China.
Yep.
So sustainability, positive sustainable moves by China is good for Hong Kong.
Yep.
So I like
And
that. So
and even with electric cars that have become so popular, BYD is, it doesn't, having, if you're driving an electric car from China in Hong Kong, the footprint, the car is not being made in another factory that's in Turkey or Japan or Europe. The footprint of bringing those electric cars into Hong Kong is a very short distance indeed. So again, we are seeing a lot more within Hong Kong consuming products locally, which I think is important. Obviously, that's a challenge when you then see BYD cars being driven globally around the world because of that footprint. But at the same time, this ability to build cars at affordable price that can allow countries to move away from petrol and gas to electric, I think is also very important.
yeah, I completely agree. Hey, I know that migration from petrol cars to electric cars to unmanned electric cars, which is the next step. But I like Hong Kong for the metro.
Yep.
There's a great metro network. You don't need a car in
Yeah.
Hong Kong.
I think that is the key for most countries. Well, actually, that's not true. But tier one Asia cities, whether you're in Singapore, Hong Kong, Tokyo, or Seoul, public transport infrastructure, even across China with the train network that we spoke about before this call, is really, really incredible. But in Hong Kong, you don't need a car because the transportation, whether it's the MTR, the bus, taxis, and not just that, but because of the size of the population, and in some ways the ability for governments to subsidize travel, it's so much cheaper. So if I'm in London taking a train, I sometimes have to frown because I'm comparing that to the cost of the ticket in Hong Kong. So we are really, really lucky here to be able to not need a car as much when you can get around so easily.
I agree completely. So if we get into just like the SMEs and how they should really build their businesses similar to what you've built, what would you say the pressures, have they evolved around an SME? Like you just use fresh accounting as an example. Do you set up in buildings near the metro? Do you think about what cities you set up in? Well, Kathmandu, obviously, but Singapore and Hong Kong. How do you maintain that ESG friendly, sustainability friendly company?
I'm panicking when I say that. I'm panicking how I answer this now because both Nick, my partner, and I do travel a lot. I'd say this year we've cut back. Um, I think a good example is like for us, our office is in central in Hong Kong, so it's really convenient and easy to get to. The office in Singapore, when some friends helped to set up the business, is very central in Singapore, just between where it's around is around the CBD. Um, in Kathmandu, that was an interesting one because when we were looking at office locations, Nepal was a no-brainer for us because both clients and friends of ours helped us make it work. And so, yes, the flights to Nepal are 4.5 hours from Hong Kong, but in terms of office location, it is very central. And I actually trying to make it as easy as possible for the team to get to. There is a bus network in Kathmandu. It's not perfect. So a lot of the team have scooters. I think whilst a lot of multinational firms during COVID have ordered work from home, multinational firms are trying to bring people back into the offices. And I know that's being hard. That is quite difficult to prove at the moment. I think for us, we've always had a come to work policy. I think the reason for that is because the teams have been quite young, unique group of people. And I think just that ability for us to work together, see each other's problems, a problem aired is a problem shared. That actually in Nepal and Hong Kong, it's been very easy to have an office of a certain size where people can just come in and work. We did implement a work from home policy during COVID, but that really did cause problems because where apartments are so small or team living with parents, it just became impossible for the team to get work done. So we immediately had an issue where everybody just wanted to be in the office. And so that created a sense of belonging, which I think is really important. But at the same time, we chat to peers and other firms, and they have the opposite issue where nobody wants to come to work. And if they do, you have to pay them more. So I feel quite lucky in what we built. We do travel regionally, and we do try and get some of the team from Kathmandu into the Hong Kong office or Singapore office, or the team from Hong Kong to Singapore and vice versa. So, and even just during summer, there was an accounting conference in London where some of the team did fly to that. So I am conscious that we do sometimes fly more than we should. But if you look at it by comparison to much larger firms, the flying that we do is far more sensible, practical, and it's needed because it's about having the face time of the key people. But we do make sure in terms of, weekly calls, we have two every week we have 2 weekly calls, and every 2 weeks we have 3 calls. So actually we try to have frequent calls between the teams so that we always know what people are doing and ensuring that we have the culture within the offices. And if anyone has a problem, there's just an ability for them to share it rather than sit on it. So I think that has been important. So for us, we try to be in Nepal from Hong Kong 2 to 3 times a year. I think 2 is realistic. And there's a Nepal team in one of the offices once a year. But having the frequent calls of how can you do, more frequent calls and contacts so that no one's left alone. And, we just build that culture because each country has its own way of doing things. So I think making sure we get through those cultural norms by having us not overdoing it on calls, but having enough to ensure that we know what everyone's doing and not getting stuck.
Well, I mean, yeah, I agree with that kind of strategy of just being cognizant, just being aware that maybe I shouldn't be traveling 10 times a year. But that just being aware of that, but also having enough calls where the team members feel confident enough, comfortable enough to contact each other on an individual basis, right?
Yes,
Uh,
agree. And I
where
think because when you're building that culture, I think it is really important. You do need to have that FaceTime. And I think that is really, really important to build the interconnectivity between the teams.
Yeah, we got lucky a little bit with COVID. We were all coming from the office. We went home, but we had already built that network. And then after about a year, people move to different companies and they don't have that network anymore. So pretty soon everybody has to come back to the office because to
That's,
rebuild those connections.
yeah, and that is much harder. And I think when you're building a business that services evolve, the client profiles evolve and the client needs evolve. I think when you actually have people working together, it's much easier to see what the next opportunities are, to understand what the next challenge is. And I think that part of speaking to friends in the UK, everyone's measured by results when they work from home. That's great in an established company. But when you are in an SME and you are evolving, growing, I think having that sense of belonging is important because it also allows us to develop the next ideas for clients, and the sustainability, ESG reporting. You just need to have one conversation in the office and people have ideas. Well, we talk about a client that has a problem that we need to solve. So bringing people together is really important.
Yeah, I agree. How do you build that camaraderie where you can solve something together. I like how you put it, people getting together. What gets aired, what gets shared, what gets aired gets shared. I like
Really
that.
important.
What about, if you were to remember back when you started an industry, what would you tell a young person starting out in accounting today? How do you build a career that, you can be proud of over the next 20 years? What would you say to them?
I was
What
going to
have you
say, my original answer was don't do it, do something else. But, joking aside, I think my younger self was, I think, to be curious, to be interested, to be curious, show interest. A stupid, any, yeah, this is a hard question now. Be curious, show interest, take on responsibility. Because I know, and just a little bit on the AI part, which is we're talking about how AI is going to do so much of the basics, but I think understanding the basics is really, really important and fundamental. But I do believe accounting is storytelling. And I think that part that for accountants, the ability to communicate with people is still needed. And I feel that that is the important part. There is still a place for accountants. So I would remind my young self that there is a bright future. And actually, people do want to talk to each other. And the more successful clients are, you do need human interaction and you do need to have people to be able to work with. And I think that is really, really key.
Great, great. That's a wonderful way almost to close out ALECA Talks today. Paul, you've shared your journey, from London to Hong Kong, building fresh accounting and shaping how SMEs think about purpose. Sustainability is very much part of management accounting, and I'm very happy to hear that the future of finance is firmly lodged in sustainability. Your insights on China, I know it's a difficult relationship sometimes, Hong Kong to China, but I feel quite optimistic about the sustainability. If it's sustainable for China, it's sustainable for Hong Kong. So that's an important part
Yeah,
of the story.
I agree on that one. And I think China has just been very, just on recycling and, minimization of plastic, not always easy to see, but there are so many things that happen that you only can really see it when you're there. And I think that's something that we tend to forget about.
I agree in scale. Like if China makes a decision,
Yes,
the scale of that decision is overwhelming, right? It's over a
it
billion
is.
people and the second largest economy in the world. If they make a decision, it's a major one. But I'd like to say on behalf of ALECA Talks, thank you, Paul. It's been great.
So, thank you, sir. Thank you, Aleka. I've really, really enjoyed my time with you. And yeah, thank you for having me.
Okay, well, thank you again, Paul. It was our pleasure. And to all of ALECA Talks listeners, thank you for joining us. Stay tuned for more episodes of ALECA Talks on YouTube and Spotify. Until next time, keep being a leader for our sustainable future. Ciao for now.